What if I told you there's a pickup truck out there that you load from the side like a cargo plane? And another one that's basically a convertible sports car pretending to be a truck? Today we're diving into the absolute strangest pickup trucks that somehow made it from the drawing board to actual production. These aren't your typical F-150s and Silverados. These are the vehicles that made engineers question their career choices and left customers scratching their heads at dealerships. From trucks with retractable roofs to ones that look like they came straight out of a cartoon, we're counting down 20 of the weirdest pickup trucks ever built. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never look at trucks the same way again. Let's start with number 20, the Chevrolet Corvair Rampage. This truck had a concept where you loaded it from the side, which sounds practical until you realize it means parking becomes a nightmare. Imagine trying to load lumber at Home Depot when you need 3 parking spaces just to open your truck bed. The Rampage was based on Chevrolet's forward control vent platform, putting the driver right over the front wheels. It looked like someone took a regular van and just chopped off the back half. The funny thing is Chevrolet actually thought this was revolutionary. They marketed it as the most convenient loading system ever invented, but forgot to mention that you'd need a loading dock just to use it properly. The side loading ramp was heavy and awkward, and God help you if you were parked next to a wall or another car. Coming in at number 19, we have the Jeep Comanche. Now, you might think a Jeep pickup isn't that weird, but here's the thing. This model was built upon the highly popular Cherokee and shared that model's unibody setup for the cab while utilizing a traditional body-on-frame design for the bed. So basically, it was half car, half truck, and all confusion. The engineering team literally welded 2 different construction methods together and called it a day. It was like building a house where the foundation was concrete, but the walls were made of cardboard. The result was a truck that handled like a car in the front and bounced like a pogo stick in the back. AMC designed this thing during their financial troubles, and it shows. It was cheaper to use existing Cherokee parts than to design a proper truck frame from scratch. Number 18 brings us to the Lincoln Blackwood. The Lincoln Blackwood was an attempt by Lincoln to create a luxurious pickup truck that could compete with high-end SUVs. The bed was carpeted, actual carpet, like you'd find in a fancy hotel lobby. They also added a tonneau cover that was permanently attached, making it about as useful for hauling as a sports car. The Blackwood came with a standard navigation system, premium leather seats, and a sound system that cost more than most people's entire cars. But here's the kicker, it was only available in black and only with rear-wheel drive. So this luxury truck couldn't even handle a light dusting of snow. Lincoln thought they were creating the ultimate status symbol, but they ended up creating a truck that was too fancy to work and too weird to be taken seriously. At number 17, we meet the Dodge Midnight Express. This truck was built for drivers who wanted everyone within a 5-mile radius to know they were coming. The Midnight Express wasn't just a truck, it was a rolling disco ball. It featured gold pinstriping that caught the light like a Vegas casino, plush velour interiors that belonged in a 1970s bachelor pad, and enough chrome to blind approaching aircraft. The whole thing was painted in deep metallic blue with silver accents that made it look like it was wrapped in Christmas wrapping paper. Dodge marketed this as a lifestyle vehicle, but the only lifestyle it represented was that of someone who had won the lottery and immediately lost all sense of taste. Number 16 is the reinvent.com. Yes, that's actually its name, complete with the .com part, because this was built in 2001 when everyone thought the internet was going to revolutionize everything, including pickup trucks. This bright orange monstrosity looked like someone had taken a Hot Wheels car and scaled it up to full size using a photocopier. The most bizarre feature was a built-in crane designed to carry Bob, a motorized scooter that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie. Swiss automaker Rinspeed clearly had too much fondue before designing this one. The truck's body was covered in tattoo-style graphics, hence the name, making it look like it belonged in a comic book rather than on actual roads. Number 15 takes us to the Ford Ranchero. This vehicle suffered from a serious identity crisis. It couldn't decide if it wanted to be a car or a truck, so it ended up being bad at both. The Ranchero was Ford's attempt to create a vehicle that combined the comfort of a car with the utility of a truck. The result was something that looked like someone had performed surgery on a sedan with a chainsaw. It had car-like handling, which sounds good until you try to load anything heavy in the back and realize the suspension was never designed for actual work. The bed was so shallow that you could barely fit a bag of groceries without it flying out on the first turn. Ford kept producing this thing for over 2 decades, apparently convinced that someday people would figure out what to do with it. At number 14, we have the Chevrolet El Camino. The El Camino was part of the whole car truck movement that Detroit was obsessed with in the 70s and 80s. It was essentially a Malibu that had been in a horrible accident and lost its back seat. Chevrolet marketed it as a vehicle that could take you to the office and then to the construction site, but the reality was that it was uncomfortable for office work and useless for construction. The El Camino became popular with a very specific demographic, people who wanted to look tough, but didn't actually want to do any real truck work. It was the mullet of the automotive world. Business in the front, party in the back, and questionable in the middle. Number 13 introduces us to the Subaru Brat. This little Japanese truck had the strangest feature of all: 2 rear-facing seats in the truck bed. That's right, Subaru thought it would be fun to let passengers ride in the back like they were on a hayride, except at highway speeds. The seats even had seatbelts, as if that would help when you got rear-ended by a semi-truck. The Brat stood for Bi-Drive Recreational All-Terrain Transporter, which was a fancy way of saying tiny truck with death seats. It was marketed as a recreational vehicle for outdoor enthusiasts, but it was really just a lawsuit waiting to happen. The rear-facing seats were actually a response to import tariffs. By adding the seats, Subaru could classify the Brat as a passenger car instead of a truck, avoiding higher import duties. Coming in at number 12, we have the Volkswagen Rabbit pickup, also known as the Caddy in some markets. VW took their economy car and decided to turn it into a truck, apparently forgetting that trucks are supposed to be able to haul things. The result was a vehicle that looked like a regular Rabbit that had been in a really bad accident. It had the power of a lawnmower and the payload capacity of a shopping cart, but hey, at least it got good gas mileage. The Rabbit pickup was so underpowered that it struggled to get out of its own way, let alone haul anything useful. VW marketed it as perfect for small businesses, but the only business it was perfect for was delivering flowers, and even then, only if the flowers weren't too heavy. Number 11 brings us to the Dodge Rampage. This was Chrysler's answer to the compact pickup trend, based on their K-Car platform. The K-Car platform was notorious for being cheap and poorly built, so naturally, Chrysler thought it would make a great foundation for a truck. The Rampage looked like someone had taken a station wagon and forgotten to put the roof on the back half. It was supposed to be sporty, but driving it was like trying to race with a refrigerator strapped to your back. The front-wheel drive system meant that any significant weight in the bed would cause the front wheels to lose traction, making it dangerous to drive when actually loaded. Chrysler sold it as a lifestyle vehicle for young professionals, but the only lifestyle it represented was one of poor decision-making. At number 10, we meet the Plymouth Scamp. Yes, Plymouth made a pickup truck, and it was just as weird as you'd expect. The Scamp was basically a rebadged Dodge Rampage with different trim pieces and a Plymouth badge. It proved that you could take a bad idea and make it worse by changing the nameplate. Plymouth dealers had no idea how to sell these things. They were too weird for truck buyers and too truck-like for car buyers. The Scamp lasted only 2 years in production, which was probably 2 years too long. It was one of the final nails in the coffin of the Plymouth brand, proving that badge engineering couldn't save a fundamentally flawed concept. Number 9 is the Chevy Love. Despite its name, nobody really loved this truck. It was actually built by Isuzu and rebadged as a Chevrolet, part of GM's strategy of selling foreign-built vehicles under American nameplates. The Love stood for Light Utility Vehicle, but it was so light that a strong wind could probably flip it over. It looked like a real truck that had been shrunk in the wash. The bed was so small that you could barely fit a bicycle in it, and the cab was so cramped that anyone over 6 feet tall would be driving with their head tilted to the side. GM sold these things for over a decade, apparently convinced that Americans wanted trucks that looked like toys. Number 8 brings us to the Ford Courier. This was Ford's version of the compact pickup, built by Mazda and sold in the United States with Ford badges. The Courier was so small that you could practically pick it up and carry it yourself. It had about as much hauling capacity as a bicycle with a basket. Ford marketed it as perfect for light-duty work, but the only work it was good for was delivering newspapers. The Courier was reliable and fuel-efficient, but it was also embarrassingly small and underpowered. It was the automotive equivalent of bringing a knife to a gunfight. Technically, it was a tool, but it wasn't going to help you get the job done. At number 7, we have the Chevrolet S10. While not particularly weird on its own, the S10 spawned some truly bizarre variants. There was the S10 Blazer that looked like someone had forgotten to finish building it, and various sport packages that made it look like a Hot Wheels car that had been scaled up to full size. GM kept adding more aggressive body kits and graphics packages, turning what had been a reasonably normal small truck into something that looked like it belonged in a video game. The S10 Extreme was particularly ridiculous, with a lowered suspension that made it useless for any actual truck work and body cladding that made it look like it was wearing armor to a pickup truck battle. Number 6 is the Dodge D50. This was another rebadged Mitsubishi truck that Dodge tried to pass off as their own during the era when American manufacturers were desperately trying to compete with Japanese imports by just slapping their badges on foreign vehicles. The D50 looked like it was designed by someone who had never seen a truck before but had it described to them over the phone by someone who was also drunk. It had weird proportions that made it look like it was always surprised, with headlights that seemed too big for its face, and a grille that looked like it was permanently shocked. The D50 was actually a decent little truck mechanically, but it was so ugly that people would rather walk than be seen driving one. Dodge dealers struggled to move these things off the lot, often having to offer massive incentives just to get people to consider them. Coming in at number 5, we have the Isuzu Hombre. This was GM's badge engineering at its finest. They took a Chevy S10, removed all the Chevrolet badges, slapped Isuzu badges on it, and called it a day. The name Hombre was supposed to make it sound tough and masculine, but it just made it sound like a truck that was having an identity crisis. The Hombre was identical to the S10 in every way except for the badges and some minor trim differences. It was like GM thought consumers were too stupid to notice they were buying the exact same truck with different stickers. The Hombre lasted only 4 years before Isuzu gave up on the American truck market entirely, probably because people kept asking why they were paying Isuzu prices for a Chevrolet truck. Number 4 introduces us to the Mitsubishi Mighty Max. Despite its name, there was nothing mighty about this truck. It was about as powerful as a golf cart and looked like it had been designed by someone who thought all trucks should look like anime characters. The Mighty Max had a face that looked permanently angry, with narrow headlights and a grille that seemed to be scowling at the world. It was proof that just because you can build something doesn't mean you should. The truck was reliable and fuel-efficient, but it was also embarrassingly small and underpowered. Mitsubishi tried to market it as a serious work truck, but the only work it was good for was delivering pizza. The name Mighty Max became a running joke among truck enthusiasts, who would use it to describe anything that was supposed to be tough, but obviously wasn't. At number 3, we have the GMC Cyclone. This wasn't your typical pickup truck, it was a rocket ship disguised as a work vehicle. The Cyclone was based on the GMC Sonoma, but came with a turbocharged V6 engine that made it faster than a Ferrari. We're talking about a truck that could go from 0 to 60 in under 5 seconds, which was absolutely insane for 1991. But here's the weird part. It was lowered and came with all-wheel drive, making it completely useless for any actual truck work. You couldn't tow anything with it, you couldn't haul anything meaningful in the bed, and you definitely couldn't take it off-road. It was a truck that was designed specifically to embarrass sports cars at traffic lights. GM made only about 3,000 of these things, probably because they realized that making a truck that couldn't truck was a pretty stupid idea. Number 2 is the Ford Explorer Sport Track. This thing was Ford's attempt to create a pickup truck based on an SUV, which sounds backwards because that's exactly what it was. The Sport Track looked like someone had taken a regular Explorer and chopped off the back half with a saw. It had 4 doors and a tiny bed that was about as useful as a decorative flower box. Ford marketed it as the perfect vehicle for people who needed the utility of a truck, but the comfort of an SUV, but what they created was a vehicle that was bad at both. The bed was too small to haul anything meaningful, and the ride was too truck-like to be comfortable. It was like Ford took all the worst aspects of trucks and SUVs and combined them into one confused vehicle. The sport truck lasted for 2 generations, which was 2 generations too many. And finally, at number 1, we have the Chevrolet SSR. The Chevrolet SSR was Chevrolet's answer to a question that nobody was asking. What if we made a pickup truck that's also a convertible sports car? The result was a vehicle that looked like it had driven straight out of a cartoon and into a nightmare. The SSR stood for Super Sport Roadster, which was a fancy way of saying, we have no idea what we're doing. One of the most striking features of the SSR's design was its retractable hardtop roof, which meant you could turn your truck into a convertible at the push of a button. This sounds cool in theory, but in practice, it meant you had a truck that couldn't handle weather and a convertible that couldn't carry anything. The SSR was terrible at being both a truck and a sports car. It was characterized by annoying vibrations at highway speeds, especially with the top down. The bed was so small you could barely fit a bicycle in it, and the whole thing weighed as much as a small building. The SSR was powered by a Corvette engine, which sounds impressive until you realize that all that power was being used to haul around a truck that had the aerodynamics of a brick and the practicality of a chocolate teapot. The interior was a confusing mix of truck and sports car elements that didn't work well together. The seats were designed to look like they belonged in a hot rod, but they were actually quite uncomfortable for long drives. The dashboard was a mix of retro styling and modern technology that looked like it had been designed by a committee of people who had never met each other. But here's the real kicker. The heated seat controls were positioned so poorly that you couldn't actually use them with the doors closed. That's right, they designed heated seats that you couldn't turn on while sitting in the truck. It was this kind of attention to detail that made the SSR such a spectacular failure. The SSR was supposed to capture the spirit of classic hot rods, but instead, it captured the spirit of confusion and compromise. It was too weird to be a truck, too impractical to be a sports car, and too expensive to be worth buying. Chevrolet priced it like a luxury car, but built it like a truck, resulting in a vehicle that satisfied nobody. The SSR was heavy, unwieldy, and had a truck bed that was more decorative than functional. It was like someone took a perfectly good Corvette and decided to ruin it by making it less practical and more expensive. But here's what's really fascinating about all these weird trucks. They represent something bigger than just bad design decisions. Each one of these vehicles was someone's attempt to solve a problem that didn't exist or to fill a market gap that wasn't really there. The automotive industry has always been obsessed with creating the perfect hybrid vehicle, something that can do everything for everyone. The problem is that when you try to make something that does everything, you usually end up with something that does nothing well. The late 1970s through the 2000s were particularly crazy times for pickup truck design. Gas prices were fluctuating wildly, emissions regulations were getting stricter, and manufacturers were trying to figure out what consumers actually wanted. Should trucks be more car-like? Should cars be more truck-like? Should everything just be a weird hybrid that nobody understands? This led to an era of experimentation that gave us some of the most bizarre vehicles ever produced. Companies were throwing everything at the wall to see what would stick. The result was a parade of vehicles that looked like they were designed by committee, where each committee member had a completely different idea of what a truck should be. The marketing departments were just as confused as the engineers. They had to figure out how to sell vehicles that didn't fit into any existing category. How do you market a truck that can't truck? How do you sell a convertible that looks like a construction vehicle? The answer, apparently, was to just throw a bunch of meaningless words together and hope for the best. Hence names like Super Sport Roadster and Bi-Drive Recreational All-Terrain Transporter. The real tragedy is that many of these trucks actually made it to production. These weren't just concept cars that were shown at auto shows and then forgotten. Real people bought these things. Real dealerships had to try to sell them. Real mechanics had to work on them. The Chevrolet SSR, for example, was in production for 3 years. 3 years! That means thousands of people looked at this convertible truck and thought, yes, this is exactly what I need in my life. It's a testament to human optimism and the power of marketing that any of these vehicles found buyers at all. What's even more amazing is that some of these weird trucks have now become collector's items. The same vehicles that nobody wanted when they were new are now sought after by enthusiasts who appreciate their weirdness. The Chevrolet SSR, which was a sales disaster when it was new, now commands premium prices on the used car market. The Subaru Brat, with its ridiculous rear-facing seats, is now considered a classic. It just goes to show that sometimes being spectacularly weird is better than being forgettably normal. The legacy of these weird trucks lives on in today's automotive industry. Modern manufacturers are still trying to create vehicles that blur the lines between different categories. We have SUVs that pretend to be trucks, trucks that pretend to be cars, and cars that pretend to be SUVs. The only difference is that today's weird vehicles are better engineered and more carefully thought out than the automotive experiments of the past. So there you have it, 20 of the weirdest pickup trucks ever built. From side-loading Corvairs to convertible Chevys, these vehicles prove that sometimes the automotive industry's reach exceeds its grasp. They're reminders that innovation isn't always improvement, and that just because you can build something doesn't mean you should. These trucks are now collector's items, not because they were good, but because they were so spectacularly weird that they've become fascinating pieces of automotive history. They're rolling reminders of an era when car companies were willing to take risks, even if those risks resulted in vehicles that looked like they were designed by someone who had never seen a truck before. The next time you see a regular pickup truck, take a moment to appreciate its normalcy. Because somewhere out there, there's a designer sketching up the next weird truck that will make us all question what we thought we knew about automobiles. And honestly, I can't wait to see what they come up with next. If you enjoyed this journey through automotive weirdness, you're going to love our next video, which you should totally watch, after you subscribe, of course.